Hello, welcome to Hare in the Hawthorne. My name's Kate Ray and I'm your host. And today on the virtual sofa, we have Neil Geddes-Ward. I've got a bio for him, which is probably only a small section of this guy's life, what he does and what he knows about. I'm really pleased to have him on board. I've just been chatting with him about all things strange before we came into recording. And I think it's just going to be one of those very weird, meandering chats that are going to go into all kinds of different crevices when it comes to the paranormal. So he's a co-author of a book called Faerie, and it's one I don't know whether I've got on my shelf or not, but if I haven't, I'm certainly going to go out and check that one out and buy it on Amazon. He's a pagan, a visionary artist, which I definitely want to talk to him about because his artwork is something that I've come across very early doors with knowing Neil in a past incarnation in the fairy world. So he's appeared on TV and radio in both the UK and the US, talking about all things paranormal, all things of high strangeness. He's conducted workshops, and this is something that I really didn't know about him, and he's conducted workshops in spiritualism, mediumship, psychic development. Again, that's another hot topic that I want to talk to him about. He's made short films. He also put together a meeting that took place in High Wycombe in Buckinghamshire, which was the High Wycombe Paranormal Meet. So don't let that title fool you, because it was superb. It was brilliantly crafted, those meetings. He's currently writing a book. Now, this book is what brought me to want to chat with Neil, and he's kind of chatted with me about it because of my fairy experiences, but I want to pick his brain more because it sounds like he's collating experiences that people are having and putting it into a context of a book that's more modern than a lot of the fairy encounters books that we come across. That's encounters with fairies, ghosts and spirits. And last but not least, he's co-host of the Paranormal Peep Show, which I had the pleasure of being on not long ago, and sort of talking myself hoarse for nearly 2 hours. I didn't think I had it in me, but it was great fun. It was really great fun. So without further ado, and I'll stop my rambling, I want to give a warm welcome to Neil Geddes-Ward. Hi, Neil.
Hello, Kate. How are you then?
I'm good. Yeah, I'm good. It's a nice sunny day. We're in the midst of a bit of an Indian summer at the minute, so I'm really pleased. I'm liking the sunshine. I'm liking the warmth. We're not quite in autumn yet, I don't think. So
Yeah, although I am feeling slight chills in the air, so that's a clue.
yes, I mean, I went out this morning. I did a bit of barefooting on the garden, and it was definitely. I think there'd been a snap of a frost last night, so my feet were telling me it was definitely chillier. We're getting into the spooky realms of the season. You know, we're coming up. I always think of September as Halloween Eve. The whole of September is Halloween Eve for me. You know, we're getting into Pumpkinsville. I want to start off with a question that I ask a lot of people to begin with. And I know it's kind of a bog standard question when you come to the paranormal world. Can you remember what your first strange experience was that kind of kick-started your interest in all things weird?
Yeah, before we do that then, I must correct you on some of the things. Now, whether it says out on my profile that you read out or not, but I'm not a pagan, first of all.
Okay.
I've actually run pagan groups, and I've
Mm-hmm.
gone to pagan events and done talks at pagan things, but I'm not a pagan. I
Oh.
might be called a pagan artist, because that's the other thing we didn't mention. I'm an artist.
Mm-hmm.
Some people call me a pagan artist, but the way I liken it to people is that, for instance, if I painted steam engines, which I don't paint steam engines, but if I did, it doesn't make me a train driver.
True.
You see what I'm saying?
Very
And if I
true.
paint spaceships, it doesn't make me a starship captain.
I like that analogy.
So, yeah. So basically, I painted lots of pictures and still do paint lots of pictures that pagans bought because it had a feel of Lord of the Rings, fantasy, and that kind of stuff. And because I did talks at these pagan events, people would say, "What pathway do you follow?" And I say, "I don't follow it," and they couldn't understand it, and it confused the hell out of them. So I understand the pagan thing, or a lot of it. I don't understand all of it, but I do understand of it. And, you know, I'm happy for people to do that sort of thing. I'm quite happy to mix with these people. I don't fear them or anything like that. I've spent a lot of times at pagan events and things like that, but I'm not pagan, but I am an artist. I would term myself spiritual researcher, investigator, that kind of thing. And getting back to the question about anything that kind of put me on this pathway, it wasn't really an experience per se. It was more of a curiosity.
Mhm.
And what it was is that as a kid, I used to love watching things like Star Trek as a kid. My mum loved watching Star Trek and we used to watch it with her on an old black and white TV. And Doctor Who, anything with space, monsters, creatures from outer space, anything ghosty and weird, um, was a fascination for me. And I didn't understand why. And I just loved looking up at the stars at night and thinking, God, I wish I could fly up amongst the stars. I used to jump from in my garden as a kid, jump up in the night sky and see if I would carry on. But unfortunately, Earth brought me back down, with a swift bump. But one pivotal question kind of started the ball rolling. Was I one day asked my mum, and I can't remember what age I was. I said, "Mum, where was I before I was born?" And she said, "You didn't exist." And I thought, well, I must have existed. Surely I could not understand how I did not exist. And I was really, really curious about that. I thought I must have been somewhere, even if I don't remember it. So I didn't have an answer then. But as I got older, I started to see things like on TV, the medium Doris Stokes, who was a 1970s, 1980s medium, very old lady, who used to come on TV and sometimes talk about mediumship and communicate with the afterlife, and that kind of intrigued me a lot. And we used to obviously get magazines given to us by family members, grands and granddads, of old Reader's Digests that they'd finished reading. They used to pass it on to my family. And occasionally I'd flick through what was in that Reader's Digest, and it said, "I died on the operating table." And I thought, what does that mean? So I'd read it. And it'd have someone with an afterlife experience. They'd go through this tunnel of light and see some being or encounter their residents in some kind of other realm. And that really struck a chord with me. So really, it was those kind of little things was piquing my interest, and so I wanted more of it. I wanted to find out more. And as time went on, as I got older, there'd be books like The Unexplained would come on to the market. I never actually bought them, but I thought, well, that looks interesting. I used to get any books on ghosts or anything like that from the school library that I could find. I used to look through ghost books. And about 1979, 1980, I can't remember the exact year it came out, there was a series called The Mysterious World of Arthur C. Clarke, presented by the science fiction writer Arthur C. Clarke. And they'd cover different topics each week, from UFOs and Loch Ness monsters to spiritualism and communication with the afterlife. So, of course, that really kind of got me interested. And what happened was, I think in one of the episodes featuring spiritualism, they covered the Spiritualist Association of Great Britain in London. And they showed people doing demonstrations of stuff there. So when I got to the age of 16, I could obviously travel about a bit more, go on the train and stuff. And so I phoned up Director of Inquiries and got the telephone number of the Spiritualist Association of Great Britain. And apparently you could book readings and have a reading with a medium. So me and a few mates travelled up there on the train, and we had a right old giggle, as you do when you're younger, and we booked a reading with a medium, and it kind of struck a chord with me. It all seemed really interesting, and they sold books there, so of course I started to buy the books and read it with an avid interest. So that's really how the whole thing got rolling. It wasn't any experience back in my younger years, no ghosts appearing in my doorway or anything like that. It was just a curiosity factor that drove me forward.
I think for a lot of people that I've spoken to, that has been the sort of general theme, especially those who are sort of interested in cross disciplines, who are interested in things, not just one specific subject, but understand the relationship between things like UFOs, crypto, ghosts, fairies, and that there are crossovers. That the starting point for those people, and for myself as well, is general curiosity into things that are odd and strange. And I think that kind of helps project you into an arena where you are more open-minded about such things. I'm just going to go quickly back. You said about you're not a pagan, and I find that interesting. For me, for a very long time, I didn't see pagan, and I struggle with pagan as a religion. I For me, it was always a philosophy that um, gave me the freedom to be able to explore what I wanted to explore. And I suppose, is that the same for you with the spiritualism, that it gives you a grounding to be able to explore a whole raft of concepts?
Well, even with the spiritualism tag, I don't really go with the spiritualism tag, but it's one of those things. It's just I consider spiritualism like a shop that you go to get certain items, and I think, oh yeah, I want to go and see a medium. Where can I go and get a medium from? Oh, the old spiritualism shop or a spiritualist church, as is the case. But the thing about spiritualism, I don't like going into churches. I'm not really a church goer. I don't like singing the hymns. I don't like doing all the prayers, all the religious side of it. I could forget, quite happily forget. I'm just purely interested in the communication of the medium, contacting the other realm, wherever that other realm is or wherever it may be. I'm interested in the science of it and the possibilities that it unfolds. All the other nuts and bolts that go with it, I can forget. So I wouldn't even call myself a spiritualist. Although, again, like the pagan thing, I spent lots of times with spiritualists. I understand what they're talking about. I understand their principles and things like that, and I respect all that. Some of it I could probably quite agree with, but I don't like to say this is our religion from here to here, nothing else. I like the idea of sort of just keep expanding and see where we go with the whole thing, you see.
I spent a short time going to a spiritualist church just out of curiosity. And one thing I can say about it is that you do get to see a plethora of different styles of mediumship, platform mediumship. But also there was lots of different ideas that people were bringing to that arena. And specifically bits of technology that seemed to be doing the rounds, where you could sort of prove about people's auras or how you change their auras through meditation and mediumship. So for me, that was it was definitely a treat. But I'm like you, the hymns and stuff, I'm not so great with that. It's a bit too on the Christian side for me.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I did find some of the spiritualist churches. I mean, I go in them and do like training work. So I end up doing psychic development, and I spend a lot of time in these churches in afternoons and things like that. And I'd noticed they'd have a Bible on their plinth, and I actually walked up onto the area where they have the Bible. And I thought, this is dusty, this Bible. No one's turned any pages in this Bible for years. And
Yeah.
it's like that. I felt that they were putting the Bible there and the picture of Jesus at the front because it's a lip service to Christianity or God or Jesus. But in fact, I've never seen one spiritualist read from the Bible in all my years of going to a spiritualist church. I've never seen them pointing at a picture of Jesus. I mean, now and again, they might have talked about the Nazarene being a medium, and that's about it. But 95% of the time, it's communication with the afterlife and spirit guides and that sort of stuff. So I felt that really, in my opinion, they should just throw away the Bible and the pictures of Jesus and just revitalize it and renew it. But that might upset a few people.
I think the thing is as well, when you attach yourself to Christianity, it almost gives you a safe haven to be able to do things like that. I know, just on a side, using church halls, etc., for any kind of off-center work, so whether it be spiritual development or psychic development or even meditation, some village halls will get a bit kind of quirky with you about wanting to do that. So if you have got a spiritualist church and you can tag that into, actually we're a section of Christianity, it kind of gives you a bit of a stealth. Maybe we're going to get shot down for this. Maybe we're going to get like loads of spiritualist ministers sort of coming back and saying, you're completely wrong, we do believe in Jesus, etc. So I do apologize for that side of things. So do you actually practice mediumship? Is this something that you do, or is it something that you had done and you found that teaching it, going out and teaching these practices is your calling?
I wouldn't say it's my calling. How that all came about was that obviously I mentioned earlier that when I was younger, I used to go for these readings with the mediums at the Spiritualist Association of Great Britain, and I used to go there quite regularly, every Saturday or twice a month or something. And quite a few times, the mediums would, as well as give me the reading, say, "By the way, you know that you can do this too." And I said, "What do you mean?" They said, "You can do this mediumship." And I said, "Well, I've never seen a ghost." I was really skeptical of that. I thought, I don't understand this. So anyway, I started to drive a few years later when I was about age 19, and I found a more local spiritualist church that just started in Uxbridge at the Civic Centre in Uxbridge. So it's a very high-tech modern building at the time. It wasn't a dusty old spiritualist church. And the guy there basically said, look, we're going to be recruiting people for a developing circle. is anyone interested? Please come and make yourself known to me. So I thought, well, I've always been told I'm psychic or whatever by these mediums. I'm curious now. I want to see if I do have something. So I went and put my name forward, and I was invited to go and attend their spiritualist psychic developing circle. And I would go there once a week in the evenings and do meditations and things like that. And I really wasn't sure whether I had anything, but we were told on one evening that we had to concentrate on the person sitting opposite us. If you can hear a dog barking, sorry about that. That's my girlfriend's dog in
That's
the cage
fine.
next door, and it can hear people. So yeah, where was I? Throw me slightly. Yeah, so I'd have to concentrate on the man opposite me, and the person on the other side of the room would have to concentrate on whoever's sitting opposite them. And I went into this deep kind of slumberous, almost like a sleep meditation. And the idea was I was going to try and pick up information about this guy and then relate it to him after the meditation was over. Now, I'm not very good at meditating, but I just remember getting these words sort of in my mind telepathically, but I could clearly hear it in my mind as a Cockney accent, like a London taxi driver. And it said something like, tell him he's got something wrong with his waterworks, like that. And I thought, crikey, where did that come from? And I was thinking, oh my God, and of course that startled me. So I almost came out of the meditation. So I just waited till everyone came back. And now mediums wrap messages up. I don't know if you're aware of that. They wrap messages up. If they're private and they might be slightly embarrassing to the recipient, they've been told they've got to wrap it up so that only the recipient would understand.
Mm-hmm.
Now, of course, I was a lot younger, and I thought, how on earth do I wrap this message up so that it's private? I don't want to say in front of everybody he's got something wrong with his waterworks and embarrass the poor chap. Because this guy was in his 60s. So all I could think of to say at that point was, oh, I believe you're seeing the doctor about a condition. And you're having it treated. But it was so bloody general, anybody could have said that. And he goes, yes, you're quite right, I am seeing something about that. And I thought, well, okay. So anyway, I remember speaking to my mate about it, and I was about 19 and he was like 29 at the time. And he said, oh, he's probably got something wrong with his prostate.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know what a prostate was
Mm-hmm.
at that time. And he says, well, men in their 60s get problems with it sometimes because it gets enlarged and it causes them to go to the loo a lot more. I said, oh, really? I didn't know that. So I thought, well, maybe I was right. But so whoever told me, this East End taxi driver from the spirit world, told me about it. That kind of piqued my interest. I thought, well, maybe I do have something. So I carried on trying to develop, and then eventually got to the point where I'd have to stand up in front of a load of people and try and do this in front of a load of people, which is kind of nerve-wracking to a certain extent, but you try and hold your focus. And I'd find things as I'm doing something. I suddenly hear a voice say something to me, or the word pops in my head. I mean, I've done things where I've suddenly seen the word Sainsbury's appear in front of me as I'm talking to someone. And I said, look, I'm just getting a connection here with you and Sainsbury's. I don't know what it is, but there's a strong connection between you and Sainsbury's. I don't know if you like shopping there or something. And she goes, oh, actually, that's where I work, is Sainsbury's, you see. So I started to pick up all that information. So I know that I've got something there. I don't go out and say I'm a professional medium, but I've got mediumistic abilities, and I have tried to teach other people this in small circles. So I wouldn't say I'm a professional like Tony Stockwell or really, really good people. Part of the problem was that I never carried on developing it as much as I'd like, is that the work I've been doing over the last sort of 20 years was in broadcasting, and that involved working a lot of shift patterns, which meant that I couldn't commit myself to a weekly evening session of development, you see, because of that, which would have upset the people that I was meant to be going to see, that I'd not be turning up some weeks, you see. And I would want to make it consistent and try and be good with them. And then I've been to other circles where it didn't quite work for me. I couldn't relate to what they was doing, or I didn't feel that I was learning, or I felt that the people that I was learning from were a bit further back from me, and I felt that I needed to be challenged a bit more. So a lot of it is trying to find the right circle as well, but a lot of it is also commitment. So I've kind of gone a little bit on the rusty side, on the mediumistic developing side, but it's hopefully something I'll try and pick up at a later date.
You're totally right about that rusty element. I mean, I sat in spiritual circle, development circle, and that once a week being committed is definitely something that you kind of zoom ahead, especially when you're with people who have contributing energies as well in that circle, and when you feel safe with those people to be able to say what's coming out and they help you decipher what's going off as well. It's you kind of rocket ahead. I've found that since the lockdown started, I haven't. At the start, I chose not to open up spiritually. I think there was too much going on, and I myself have become quite rusty with my own psychic development, and it's something that I definitely want to get back to. I was having a chat last night actually about somebody had asked me, how do you connect? How do you make these connections? And I don't know where you're at with it, but I said, for me, everybody's divine. And this isn't a gift. What the gift is realizing that you can do it. That's the gift. And I think for me, everybody has the ability to be able to tap into energies that are around them. It's just that some of us realize that that's something that can happen, and some of us, for whatever reason, realize that that it's not going to happen. When you were developing, excuse me, your skills, did you ever get that kind of walking down the street and you get a kind of hit of somebody's life and you get snippets of what they're going through? Did that ever happen to you on a...
No, because we were taught to close down after every session, because they said that otherwise you'll end up getting pestered by spirits trying to communicate with you. So we learned to open our psychic centers, if you like, our auras. No, I can't think of the word. Psychic chakras. That's the word I'm looking for. Chakras, they called them. Chakras, yeah. Open them up, and you'd spin them around mentally and try and get it all working. And then at the end of it, you'd have to close them down like petals on a flower. So the idea is that you, as you're walking down the street, you don't pick up stray bits of information from people and things like that. And I never did, because I didn't feel I was that kind of person to do that anyway. I would only pick up stuff when I'd have to shift gears, so to speak, and try and alter my state of awareness and consciousness and stuff. And sometimes it worked really well, and sometimes it didn't happen so well. But I did find things that kind of, I mean, I did a brilliant psychic reading once at someone's house, and it was like an audition to join their psychic circle. And I came in, hello, nice to meet you. And I sat down in their chair, and their great big huge dog just came and sat on my lap and kept turning around on my lap. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I've got this huge dog on my lap. What do I do? So I'm trying to do a psychic reading with this huge bloody great dog on my lap, and the weight of it was immense, but I managed to do a bloody good reading. So I'm going to have to try that technique in future. Have a great big dog sit on my lap, and that'll get my psychic juices flowing.
Did you find as well with the development that because you were connecting with spirit, that you had more encounters outside of that with spirit? I mean, have you seen a ghost? Have you encountered a ghost or a haunting personally? And did that increase as you developed psychically?
No, I'm one of these people that I don't see spirit. That's the interesting thing. I mean, I've seen something that might have been a spirit many years ago, where I was staying at a house and I woke up in the middle of the night and I saw a pair of legs, trousers, baggy trousers, standing in front of the door. And it went up to a body, but it was almost in shadow. I couldn't see the top half of the body. And remember, the room was sort of darkish. But I could see these baggy trousers, and I could hear someone talking. But it's almost like the teacher's voice in Charlie Brown cartoons, where you'd hear a voice of the teacher, and you couldn't hear it very clearly.
Yeah.
And I was going, what? I was trying to sort of suss out what they were saying. So in the end, I sort of turned over and went back to sleep. And so I don't know if I was dreaming or hallucinating, I don't know. But generally, on the whole, I don't see spirit or anything manifested in front of me. I feel things. I feel people, and I felt things come into my aura that's given me a sort of takes my breath away as it passes through me or gets close to me for me. And as soon as they come into my aura, I feel them. That's when I start getting the best information come through. And a lot of mediums will tell you they'll feel people on their right hand side or on their left, near their heads. You don't feel in the middle, and that's how you know it's someone else's thoughts. You sense someone's here, or you sense someone's there. Other people may have different experiences, granted, but that's generally how a lot of mediums feel it. And generally, I can kind of feel if it's a male or a female. There's one particular occasion, though, when I was doing a reading on a gentleman, but I felt something right down by my feet, and I thought, this is very odd. I'm normally feeling people up here. Why am I feeling something down by my feet to my left? I couldn't see anything, but I felt that it was a small creature of some sort. And I said to the guy I was doing the reading for, that I said, this sounds really weird, but I feel I've got a gnome. and he's
Yeah.
down here by my feet and he's connected with you in some way. I said, I know that sounds crazy, but that's what I'm feeling. He goes, no. He said, I can absolutely take that. He said, I went and saw a medium XY number of months or whatever ago previously, and she told me that I've got a gnome that follows me about. So you've picked up the very same gnome. So I thought, oh, that's interesting.
I was going to ask you about that because I started having, when I was developing, I started having encounters with things that I was like, there's no way this is going off, and it was the strangest of creatures, and it wasn't just symbolically that they were coming through. They weren't just, in the energetic field to give me messages, which often creatures do, as in the symbolism of them. These were actual creatures. And it got me into a bit of hot water at one stage, in the spiritualist community, because I was saying, I'm seeing these really dark entities for a start. There was a period where I was seeing really dark energies that were presenting absolutely clear as day to me, and I could describe them to a T, and the energy that they were giving out. So I find it fascinating that when you kind of open up to that, you don't just open up to the spirits of the dead and deceased, but you also open up to a raft of other beings and other dimensions and other worlds. What is your take on other dimensions other than the sort of the spirit world? Where are you at? Because I'm going to have to mention this. I know you from a long time ago. You were doing the rounds on the fairy scene, promoting your beautiful artwork, which again we'll come back to talk about. And I very much had in my mind that was a big part of your life. And I, from chatting to you before this, I know that there are other things that are greater in your knowledge base, definitely. Where are you at with the Fae? What is fairy to you? And has it got kind of crossovers to your other interests in sort of ufology and in the spiritual realm?
Interesting question. I do believe it crosses over. I mean, where I'm at with my book, I kind of the book encounters fairies, ghosts, and spirits, which I'm currently writing. I'm sort of got 2 more chapters, I think, to write on it, and then I'll go back and tidy up a little bit. But the first few chapters are to do with fairy encounters that people have had that have personally related it to me, or I've investigated it or read about it somewhere else. And I'm coming to sort of conclusion that as well as having evolution of people, animals, creatures on this earth, because there's, I believe, other dimensions or other realities. Michio Kaku is a physicist. He does theoretical mathematical quantum physics and stuff like that. He's calculated that there's 11 dimensions beyond this one. I suspect there's probably more, but I'm not a physicist, so I'm not going to argue with a physicist on that. I'll take 11. That's quite good for me. But I actually wonder if perhaps in these 11 other dimensions, potentially there is existence of other life forms. And that's where our Fae, what we call the Fae, those other creatures might inhabit. And occasionally, the systems between our dimensions are not closed. There's no closed doors between one world and the next. They intersect in the same way that you've got different rooms in a house, but they all have a door to go into. These doors are not closed to the other rooms in the house, and you can walk down a corridor and go into another room. That's like dimensions. You can travel between dimensions. You may not be able to stay in a dimension long enough. It may disorientate you, but I think you can go in there. And what I suspect is that these other creatures in other dimensions also have an evolution, maybe to a certain extent, and may evolve. There's some really strange things going on. I mean, during one of the conversations I had with this guy on a plane going to Spain, it sounds corny, but I was on a plane going to Spain many years ago, and I was one of the last passengers to get on the plane with my family. We were going there for a holiday, and this guy came and sat next to me, and he was the very last passenger to get on the plane. He was dark skinned, so I assumed he was Spanish because there was a lot of Spaniards on the plane heading back to Spain from London. But it turned out in the conversation that he came from Iran. He said, I prefer to call it Persia, but you would know it as Iran. And he said that he was an architect going out to Spain, but he lived in London now. He was going out to Spain to check on the properties that he had been developing as an architect to make sure it's all going according to plan. And he said, what do you do? Now, at the time, I lived in the Orkney Islands off the north coast of Scotland, and I ran with my ex-wife a fairy museum, which is basically my artwork with lots of legends of fairies written out for visitors to see. So I had my camera with me, of course, because I was going on holiday, and I had photographs of my artwork on there. So I showed him some photographs. And I showed him all these weird fairy beings and stuff like that. And I thought he must think I'm a bit doolally or something. So I told him a few weird fairy stories I'd been researching as part of our book Fairycraft, which you mentioned earlier. We've been investigating stories for that. And he sort of felt more comfortable, I think, after a while, because I said to him, certainly I think science has got its hand on the door handle of these new realities, but we haven't opened the door yet. Getting back to our analogies of doors, we haven't opened the door yet to these new frontier of what's out there beyond in this strange world of physics. And he said, yeah, I agree with you. We've got a hand on the door handle, but we haven't opened the door. And he said, when I was younger, I was conscripted into the Iranian army. And I had put this roughly based on his age about somewhere in the 1980s, but I wasn't sure. He didn't say the year. But he said he was patrolling the streets of Iran, in Iran, one evening with an army buddy of his. And he said that a sandstorm kicked up. And he said that's common in those areas. So most people seek shelter in a sandstorm. And it's the middle of the night. So they found a mosque. They took off their shoes, as is the custom in the mosque, and both went into this mosque. And he said to his army buddy, you lay down on the floor. I'll sit next to you with my back against the wall. I'll call this guy Hussein. And he said, I've got the gun and I'll keep an eye out for any trouble. And then after an hour, I'll wake you up and then it'll be my turn to sleep. And that was their arrangement. Anyway, Hussein, the guy with the gun, said no matter how hard he tried to stay awake, he kept nodding off and falling to sleep. And he said he fell asleep 3 times and kept waking up and going, oh, I must stay awake, and just kept nodding off. Anyway, on the 3rd time, he woke up and he thought, oh, I must stay awake. And then he noticed that there was a lady crouching down, looking at his feet. He said next to this lady was a girl about 11, 12 years of age, crouching down, looking at his friend's feet. And they're both staring at their feet intently. He thought, where the hell did these people come from? I didn't hear them come in. So he said he started to try and wake up his mate by pressing his elbow onto his chest as hard as he could to try and wake him up. He says no matter how hard he pressed, his friend wasn't going to wake up. So he said he didn't like the feeling of these 2 people there. He was going to make a run for it. I don't know why he was going to make a run for it, because he had the gun. And he said he started to wrap the strap of the gun around his hand so it wouldn't swing as he ran away. And I thought, it's only a lady and a girl. You're frightened of them. You know, you've got the gun, mate, sort of thing. But that's what he planned to do. And he said that as he was wrapping the strap around his gun, he said the lady suddenly looked up and stared at him directly in the eyes. And he said, as soon as I made eye contact, I just knew without a shadow of a doubt that this woman was not from this world, he said. I just absolutely knew. It must have been some sort of psychic connection that instantly communicated that to you, that she was not from this world. And he said, with that, the woman stood up and the girl stood up. And he said, they turned and walked away. And he said, as they walked away, he noticed they both had cloven hooved feet like a goat. He said, then they just vanished into the wall of the mosque. And that was that. And when he told me that, I felt a shiver up and down my spine. I went, oh my God. So I said, do you mind if I use that in our forthcoming book? And he goes, yeah, please do. So we wrote it in a second book, I think, which was called The Faerie Encyclopedia, I think it was called, or Encyclopedia of Fairies, with the author Jackie Newcomb, co-written with Jackie Newcomb. And so you kind of think about it, they're humans, but they're not quite humans, because they've had a different area of development. They're part animal. Now, we've got legends in our world of people that are half animal and half human. And we do have legends of people that do have cloven-hooved feet, like Pan and centaurs and things like that. So where do these legends come from? Have people in our past discovered these people, this reality, in mosques or wherever they want to appear in? They seem to come in. But they also had a curiosity about the human feet, because the girl and the woman were staring at the human feet. So to them, the human feet were really odd. And that's a really weird thing. So they're interested in us. We're interested in them, but we don't believe in them. But they certainly believe in us, because it seems that they can come in and out of our reality quite easily, whereas we can't go into theirs, maybe.
Mm.
And I think we're a more denser, lower material vibration. Certainly the spiritualists say that we're in a lower, denser material vibration. That's why there's a lot going wrong in our world, because we're not as high spiritually maybe as some of these other dimensions. So I think they exist on another reality. It's not the spirit world, the afterlife, where we would go to after we've passed over. Perhaps that could be their spirit world. I don't know, but they're coming from another dimension that is not connected, I believe, with the traditional human spirit world. And they are somehow able to come into ours. And this is what causes, I believe, these legends of cross animals and things like that.
Mm.
As again, they seem to be on this evolutionary path, which is slightly different, where nature seems to try out an experiment and say, let's give these people cloven hoof feet and see how they manage on that level of reality. It's like nature tries out different ideas, and we're one idea in this world, and there's other trials of nature going on in other worlds, maybe.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's so much in that. I don't know where to start. I think what I have heard you tell that tale before, and it's absolutely fascinating. And one of the things that really fascinates me about it is the little research that I've done outside of European sort of fairy folklore. It doesn't seem to quite fit right, with that part of the world. It's very much a kind of a European or Mediterranean ideology of cloven hooves, and so for me that kind of backs up that this story was absolutely true, because it's not necessarily something that that kind of culturally would have been passed down in fairy folklore within that region. So it is absolutely fascinating. One of the questions that I get asked, and it's one of the questions that I ponder over so much: if doors can open into our world, into other dimensions, and like you say, they are sort of rooms in a house with doors that can open to each other, do the spirits of the dead interact with these other beings? And on a side question for that, and I know it will take a much longer time for you to answer, but in that, are UFOs, let's start with this one, are UFOs in that interdimensional realm, or are they in a more physical realm as we are?
It's a big $64 million question, which they're still trying to work out. There's tales of crashed craft or crash retrievals. That's a term that goes about, where supposedly the US military or other governments of the world have retrieved craft that they've either shot down or they've crashed for whatever reason, and they're nuts and bolts craft, and they take them back to their Hangar 18, and no one ever sees them in the public eye, but they try and back engineer them to see how they work. Now, there might be UFOs or flying saucers or craft or that sort of thing that will fit that kind of physical stereotype. They might possibly come from other worlds. However, the research that I've done suggests that we do have alien bases here and maybe on the moon. So those craft that we think are UFOs, that we think are from outer space, could actually be from this world in a roundabout way. So if you, again, another analogy is that you have the Americans living in America, but they go and set up a base in Afghanistan or Iraq or one of these trouble spots in the world, and they take their local machinery over there to do their operations from. They don't keep flying backwards and forwards each day from America.
Mm-hmm.
They actually have their bases there. So when they go out and they want to drive around in Iraq or Iran, they have an SUV or a Jeep or something, and they drive around in those. Now, the local populace who would not know that might think that those SUVs have come all the way from America. They did originally, but they don't do the journey from America each and every day to come and visit them in Iran. Mm-hmm. They're actually on a base in Iran or Iraq. So the craft that we see here, possibly landing, might be from these bases that are allegedly around here on the Earth, like underwater. Lake Ontario was one that I heard about recently. Somewhere in the mountains of Italy, they've got secret bases, and they're called scout ships, and they fly around. Now, obviously, there's stories where they've seen craft just vanish in midair. Now, that might be them vanishing at such a speed you just don't follow the trail. They appear to vanish, but they go and zoom off so quickly. But then again, there's stories where people have been in communication with aliens. There's a contact case called the Amici case, or the friendship case in Italy, where these Italians were in contact with these aliens, and they're very human-looking aliens by the sounds of it. And they were getting things dropping through their ceiling, rather like a seance. Apports, for the people that don't know what apports are, in a physical seance in spiritualism, you would get objects that might fall from the ceiling, like a pair of glasses, not normally a pair of glasses, but it could be bottles of wine. Hopefully it's a good vintage, and petals, newspapers, rings, coins, that sort of thing. They fall from the ceiling, and they're supposedly, the spirit world has taken them from other histories of the world or other parts of the world, transported through their system of reality and re-transported it through ours, and they drop through. Now that's happened in the Amici case with aliens, so it's almost as if they're using the same dimensional gateways to bring those things through. So to be honest, if we're dabbling with other realities now at our development with spiritualism, if you like, if these aliens or occupants of UFOs are far in advance of us, they must have an understanding of these dimensions anyway. And so my feeling is that they have learned to traverse through them temporarily, or some of them might actually permanently come from them, so that we are being physically visited from people, say, Betelgeuse or Alpha Centauri or all those star systems out there. They possibly could be coming here, but I think there's other visitors that are coming literally out of one reality into our reality. Now, I did read a book where it suggested this, and what happens is that when you see a UFO that appears to be changing shape, it's coming from its reality where it is a certain shape, but as it tries to come into our reality, it's trying to conform to our laws of our universe. So therefore, it's changing its shape to conform, but it's also trying to retain the laws of its universe. So in other words, it doesn't know which shape to go to. It's almost like a natural thing. It's changing shape, distorting. God knows what's happening inside the UFO with the occupants as well, but it's trying to obey two laws of physics, if you like. And so therefore, we're seeing a slight distortion. And so therefore, that appears to explain why UFOs change shape and why they can do really weird things, is because they're possibly disappearing light goes back into their reality as well.
It's interesting you say about apports, because that's very much something that we associate in the ghost hunting community with poltergeist activity. So you get apports of coins coming out of nowhere. That's the kind of a regular basis one. Even water, bathtubs full of water sort of tipping out of nowhere. And it seems to be when we mention poltergeist, people have real difficulty putting the finger on what poltergeist is. And, people come up with all different kinds of theories that poltergeists are manifestations of human energy, of heightened human energy. Some people put them down to fae. And it's interesting to hear you talk about that in an alien context, that it could be interdimensional beings that are making their presence known by using these portal highways, if you like, that are going across time and space to make themselves known. I'm just hoping if I come across that, it is the bottle of wine. Nice bottle of rum would be much better. I mean, for me, the whole alien concept is it's something that I've been quite fearful of touching on, and I don't know where. It's an irrational fear, and it's something that I've only just started over the last few years really looking at with a seriousness, and sort of taking a step back from my irrational fears. And I find it absolutely fascinating. I'm still coming to grips with the whole different races that are out there, and when people talk about the Palladians and the reptilians, etc., I'm still kind of a real newbie. But when we spoke on the Paranormal Peep Show, and I came on to talk to you about my fairy experiences, I related one back to you that where I'd been on a plane and I'd seen this thing that I later came across a description in a well-known fairy book. I think it was the Seeing Fairy books. It's quite an old one, where somebody had described it, what I'd seen, as a dragon, and that for them, they could describe it as a dragon. And you spoke to me about something I'd never even heard of, and I mark myself as a massive 14 times fan. I've read this stuff since I was a kid, and I'd never heard of it's skyfish, isn't it? That's what they're called, skyfish.
Yeah, that is a term. I think you're talking about the work of Trevor James Constable, maybe.
Yes, yeah,
If you're alluding to that, yeah.
these big machines that they build out of piping, and I've looked into it since, because it was like, what, and the images that I saw were definitely that. There were some images that I was seeing were definitely that. And this idea does sort of play very much into things being interdimensional, as opposed to I mean, in my mind, UFOs they live on another planet, they travel down, they visit us, and in my mind, it was all about alien abduction and probing and horrible things, but, that's slowly changing. And then suddenly, I'm coming across concepts on the interdimensional level, even to the point where I spoke to somebody recently in America, and they were saying there are theories now over here about Bigfoot being fae. And in that terminology, they meant that Bigfoot was actually an interdimensional being, and this is just, it blows huge amounts of questions out there for me. And one that I did mention was, do you think these things can interact with each other as well, as well as us as humans? Do you think that they can see each other, they can communicate with each other? Does the fae world connect with the alien world, with the crypto world? Do they all connect?
Not necessarily so, because I think if they're coming from different dimensions and they're like on different levels, it could be possible that they might be standing in the same space, but not actually interfering with each other. And they could be going about their merry way and just not bumping into each other, because they're simply like radio waves passing through each other. I mean, a very interesting story that I have done some research for my book is the story of Hare Martindale and the Roman soldiers. I don't know if I've mentioned that to you before, but he was a plumber, an apprentice plumber in the 1950s. I think it's like 1953. Was called the Treasurer's House in York, in the north of England. And it was like English Heritage were responsible for the upkeep of the house. We're trying to modernize it and install radiators and things like that. And it was like the February of 1953, I believe, that he was there as a 17-year-old lad on his first job, and he was told to go down to the basement cellar, and he was basically spent 5 hours down there drilling holes and trying to pull pipes through the walls and things like that. Now, where he supported his ladder, there was a trench dug into the bottom of this cellar, and it appeared there was excavations that had been done by archaeologists of what looked like an old Roman road. Now, Harry didn't know this. He just thought, oh, this is a good place to wedge my ladder in so it won't trip up. And he climbed up his ladder, spent all day banging and stuff like that. And then after a while, maybe 5 hours down there, he could hear this really weird sound, like one note being repeated, whoa, whoa, sort of noise. And he thought, someone got a radio on or something. I can hear some weird music coming from somewhere, but it's only playing one note. And this note was getting louder and louder and louder. And eventually, from below him, because remember, he was up the ladder, he saw this Roman soldier come out of the wall, marching through the cellar. And he was so alarmed that he fell backwards off his ladder, fell onto the ground, and so he was absolutely scared out of his wits. And he scrabbled into the corner of this cellar, trying to hide from them. And he said, one after the other, these Roman soldiers were coming through, and he could only see them from the knees upwards. But he said, as soon as they reached where this trench had been dug and the Roman road appeared, their full body appeared, and he could actually see their legs as well. And they were all walking through, and he even said he saw this horse come through with a Roman centurion on the horse. He could see they were unshaven, and he could hear them speaking in a language he didn't understand. And he said they seemed quite small in stature. And he said they had green tunics, which wasn't typical of the Romans, because most Romans you see are red tunics, and they had round shields rather than the rectangular shields and things. So he said they didn't appear to be bothered by him. They just walked past him. He thought they might see him. They couldn't even see him. He said the other interesting thing is that they were covered in mud, which is an interesting point, which I make about in my book. And he ran up as soon as they'd gone. Oh, he saw the guy with the horn that was playing the tune as well come through. It was on some big horn, which the Romans, I presume, had to herald their arrival back at camp or something. Now, maybe 7 or 8 years later, these Romans were seen again by the lady who was like the caretaker of the house with her dogs, and she was going around locking up the rooms and that, and the dogs scrambled to the top of the stairs where this cellar was, and she peered down, and she could hear the horn, I think, and she could see the the Roman soldiers marching through again, and this would be about 1957, in about October 1957, about 5 or 6 years later. And she said that this time they were leading a load of horses, and they too were splattered with mud. And then she saw them a few months later. I think it might be November or December of that year. And this time she saw them again on the horses, but this time they're all on the horses rather than leading them. And they're laying over, slumped over the horses, as if they're all kind of knackered and half asleep, and the horses were leading them back to camp. But again, they were splattered with mud. And again, they didn't seem to look up at her or anything. They didn't seem to bother her. They didn't seem to be any interaction with her at all, except she could see them. And it led me to the theory, they talk about the stone tape theory, where history is recorded in the walls of these buildings. But what I found interesting is that the key thing here is that each time they were seen in the winter months of 1953 and 1957, that these Roman soldiers had mud on them. Now, if they'd seen them, for instance, in the summer of 1957, rather winter, would they have had mud on them? Because I suspect, and they were seeing different scenes, it wasn't like a recording that she was seeing or he was seeing, because they were doing different things on each time they were sighted. I suspect that what she and Hare were doing was that they were seeing doing their different tasks back 2,000 years ago, or whenever these Romans were there, but she was seeing them on the same day. So, for instance, if it was like a Monday morning in January 1957, she was seeing them in like 25 AD on a Monday morning that corresponded to her day. So if it's muddy outside in her world, it's muddy back in the Roman times, for instance, because of the seasons, because she was seeing them in November or February, and so therefore it would be muddy in those seasons in the north, and the Romans were muddy. And I suspect she was seeing, peering through time, if you like, to something that was synchronous with our time, but a different time. It's very complex, but they were playing out their role as they were, and they weren't recordings as far as I'm aware anyway. That's what I perceive. She was seeing them doing their actions as they were, which goes into the idea of simultaneous time, which is another theory where everything happens at once. So I suspect that these Roman soldiers, they couldn't see her, but they could clearly be seen. Now, occasionally, very occasionally, there are reports of people that appear to be wearing old-fashioned attire who will walk down a street or walk around a corner, and they'll bump into someone from this time frame, and they will look as shocked as you look as shocked as seeing them. Oh my God. And it's like they're seeing a ghost in their Victorian time with weird clothes, and that's you in your time. And there are reports of that. So occasionally I believe that these time frames can see each other. It's like a mirror or something, or a window into each time frame. So yes and no.
I think that for me is absolutely fascinating subject, and one that I have to stop myself a lot of the time when I'm talking about fairies and ghosts, that because it's so huge, that kind of time running in parallel, and time slipping, and the theories are just absolutely massive, but absolutely make sense. And like you say about the Roman soldiers, that's not just stone tape theory, because it's not just the same scene playing out over and over again. This is more conscious. This is a more more conscious reality that's playing out, because it is in tune with the seasons. It's not you're not seeing them with mud on it, like you say, in the summer, which kind of blows the stone tape. I'm a bit iffy about the stone tape theory, in the fact that, if I remember rightly, it came out of a play that was on a radio station, that terminology, and up until that point it hadn't really been investigated as a theory in hauntings. It was just either you were haunted by a ghost or you weren't haunted by a ghost, and everything was kind of lumped in. And it was a theory that I think came out of fiction, that was adopted in the paranormal world. So I'm still, people think that it's a really straightforward theory, and they think that that's it, the stone tape theory, and that's it. And I'm not quite sure whether, for me, it resonates that the walls hold memories. I think it's more to do with earth energy that holds that memory. That for me kind of sits a little better. I do want to talk to you. I'm very conscious of time. I do want to explore a little bit about your book, and particularly, is this a working title that you've got now, Encounters with Fairies, Ghosts and Spirits? Is that a working title, or is that going to
No,
be the
it's the
title?
title that I've chosen. Unless some publisher, if they get their hands on it, decides to call it something else, that's the title I'm going to go with.
And it's interesting that all those things that you've lumped together, fairies, ghosts and spirits, and I don't mean that in a nasty fashion about lumping them together. For me, they are lumped together. But for a lot of people, the concept of putting those kind of encounters together is a fairly alien concept. I speak to people in the ghost hunting community about fairies, and I sometimes find it very, very difficult to say, there's crossover encounters, like we've said about the apportation of objects, etc., that could be poltergeist, that would be seen as traditionally. What made you choose the fairies, ghosts and spirits as things that you wanted to convey in other people's experiences within a book?
Well, it was a case of the fact that I just picked up these stories over the years, and because the way I assembled many of these stories, not all of them, but because I'm an artist, I would go to like these pagan events where they would sometimes need a speaker, but they'd also have stalls, and I would try and sell some of my artwork on the stalls, and you have to pay a certain amount of money for your stall. So I would say, look, I'll do a talk for you, but you give me free stall and cover my petrol. And they say, oh, yeah, okay, because we need speakers. So I'd go up there and I would sing for my supper, so to speak. I would do a talk, and inevitably, after the talk, I'd get lots of people queuing up to tell me their stories. Now, a lot of the stories were maybe okay. Now and again, you get some gems of stories that I would then add into my repertoire to be related maybe at the next event. So I've built up such a large amount of stories and things that I think it makes it worthwhile sticking it into a book. But also the reason I put them together as well is because it explains, I hope, or explores the possibility that, it helps people understand a little bit about the whole thing, that there are realities possibly with a fae in, realities with ghosts in, and realities with spirits. And ghosts and spirits, for those that need to know, is that spirits I regard as the people that have died and gone on and come back and communicate this through mediums. Ghosts I would relate like the Hare Martindale story, where they appear to be either time slips where we're peering through to another time, or they could be a recording on the atmosphere, or the stone tape theory, something like that. But it's where there appears to be some sort of vision of the past that's being played out before you, but it won't necessarily interact with you. But spirits generally, I know you can get crossovers, like the old people come around the corner from their time and they see you and go, "Ooh, you're a ghost," and you're a ghost.
Yeah.
There's those kind of in-betweeners, but the general rule of thumb is that's what I call ghosts and spirits. So by putting them all together in the book as different realities, I then will come to the end of the book where we got science talking about it, and I'll talk about Michikaku talking about the different levels of reality, or different dimensions, and hopefully we might build up a better picture of possibly what's going on. That we're not just one rock floating around in the universe. There's in fact many, many windows or dimensions beyond this one, and all the doors have been left open.
Yeah, definitely. I'm so looking forward to this book. I really am. Building up my library over the years of particularly fae and quite a lot of the paranormal stuff. I do find it exciting when modern encounters are being retold, because in these books you come across the same old stories, and I don't mean that poorly, but you come across the same old stories in all the different books about people's experiences within that realm. And I really hanker for modern experiences, because they do still have the same themes historically, without even people realizing that they are having an experience that somebody 100, 200, 300 years ago were having as well. So I can't wait till it comes out. Do you know how that's going to be available yet, or?
Don't know yet. I mean, I've still got to get the final chapters done. Then I'm going to have it proofread. I might try and put it through an agency to find me a publisher, or I might try and get a publisher themselves. My guess is that once you get these things to a publisher, they might say, okay, go for it, we'll publish it, and it might be out before Christmas. But I suspect that the way that the year's racing ahead, if it comes out, it might be early next year.
Mhm.
But who knows? I can't say for sure. I might even go down the self-publishing route, and it might even come out quicker.
Yeah.
So
That'd be nice to see that out. I don't want to leave you without mentioning your beautiful artwork. It is absolutely stunning. Just want to I know this is a massive subject on its own, but just very briefly, do you think that your artistic drive fuels your spiritual drive, or your spiritual drive fuels your artistic drive, or there is something that just go hand in hand fluidly?
gosh, I'm confused by that question.
So
Say it again.
I mean, for a lot of artists, they do have spiritual experiences. Artists are always, for me, just outside the kind of norm. Was it your spiritualism that fueled you being an artist and your artwork, or did your artwork play into your spiritualism? Did it add to your spiritualism?
Right. Okay, I am an artist naturally, I suppose. I was always the art kid in the class that could draw and nobody else could. When I was like 5 years old at infant school, we'd all draw pictures of houses with blue sky at the top, and all the other kids would always draw a blue band at the top of their picture and the rest would be white, and they'd do their house. I would look out the window and see blue sky going right down to the horizon, and so I'd do blue sky all the way down the horizon. It's just because I observed it. And
Hmm.
I felt I was in the wrong for doing it because I should do it like the other people. But I thought, well, no, this is how I'm seeing it. And I just had this natural ability. Now, where I got that from is most likely from my dad, who worked as what they call a technical illustrator. So he had drawing skills as well, and he still does drawing to this day. So my art skills were a natural thing. And most of my brothers, I've got 4 brothers, most of my brothers have got that artistic ability as well, but I'm the only one that's pursued it on a more regular basis, having work published and things like that. So my interest kind of extended into the artwork. So, I mean, as a kid, I used to draw spaceships and monsters and anything that I love. So it was imaginative stuff. I could draw cats and dogs and aeroplanes and things like that. I could copy them, but I felt much more stimulated by drawing things that are more out of this world. And I still am to today. I will be drawing pictures of flying saucers or painting pictures of flying saucers or space scenes or mystical scenes, something like that, people with swords or witches or anything like that. And that's obviously because of the stuff I'm interested in. I've never really painted pictures of ghosts, though. They're probably harder to capture
Mm.
physically and on artwork as well.
Yeah, definitely. So it's shameless plugging moment. Where can we find you? Where can we find links to your artwork? Where can we find links to the Paranormal Peep Show, which is an awesome podcast that goes out into the universe? Where can we find you?
Oh my goodness. Okay, my website is neilgeddes-ward.co.uk. If it's still up, I might have to renew the domain name. So if it's not there, I apologize. But it's neilgeddesward.co.uk. People can find me on Facebook as Neil Geddes-Ward. If they just put a message in to say, I heard you on Kate's radio show, can I add you as a friend? That's fine. Sometimes I have to do that because I get lots of requests and I don't know who these people are, and I like to sort the wheat from the chaff on that, if potentially. There is a gallery of my artwork in there as well. The
Mhm.
Paranormal Peep Show, you can just literally type in the Paranormal Peep Show with Neil Geddes-Ward or Andy Chaplin, my co-host, on YouTube. It should come up. But if you need to know, there is my YouTube channel, Neil Peel, Neilpeel. It's a nickname, Neil Orange Pill from the Young Ones,
Uh-huh.
if you remember that one.
Yeah.
That's why I got that nickname.
Yeah.
So it's Neil Peel channel. But also the Paranormal Peep Show goes out as a podcast. It goes out on the different platforms, but we go out under the station of the Paranormal UK Radio Network, or paukradio.com. And we appear on all these things like Podbeam, Stitcher, iTunes, Spreaker, whatever it's called, Spreaker, one of these websites that plays audio anyway. So we're out on a lot of them, but you can type in The Paranormal Peep Show. Fingers crossed you might come up with it on Google as well.
Lovely. What's your future plans? I know we're in lockdown. Anything other than the book? You could just say other than the book.
Well, we will carry on doing the Paranormal Peep Show, of course, for the foreseeable future at least. We might even be launching our own Paranormal Peep Show YouTube channel, because we've been talking about that. I'm also in talks with some guys called Unite Planet, who have their own YouTube channel. I'll probably be doing some presentations for them, and possibly Andy, my co-host from the Peep Show, will be joining me on that. So we'll be wearing the T-shirts, literally, to show who we're working with on that one. Hopefully I'll be promoting the book and getting a few sales of that maybe next year. Presumably more interviews, doing more artwork and more filming. And who knows, really? I mean, I want to get out there and do more talks again. And it's a real bind that we're being now restricted down to currently in September to no more than 6 people in any one group now, which is an absolute. And I know you were really frustrated because I saw your
My
frustration on
rant.
Facebook about that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
your rant, and I totally agree with you. Absolutely, you know, it's. I actually gave some advice to someone. They want to do this thing called the Lapis Conference, which is up in the northeast, and now they're not sure how they're going ahead. So I put a comment to it and I said, look, why don't you guys form a charitable company, call it the Lapis Conference, because the things you can get around it by saying that it's your day of work, and all the people that attend in the conference are actually your freelance employees for the day.
That's
That way you can
brilliant.
get around it.
That's brilliant. Definitely. That's brilliant. I mean, yeah, I am really frustrated with the situation as hundreds of thousands of people are. I could spend all day talking to you, talking with you about that, because I know we're on a very similar page. But if anybody wants to find out our viewpoints, then just a quick look on our Facebook page will give you the perspective of where we're coming from. I kind of bit my tongue so many times throughout this lockdown, and been slapped on the wrist so many times for saying things that are offensive to other people. So no apologies anymore on that, I think, is the way I'm going. No apologies. Thank you
Yeah,
so much.
absolutely.
Thank you so much for your time, Neil. It's been an absolute pleasure. I'm sure that people have questions about this, and a follow up, I think, will be in the offering, if you're up for it. And
Yeah, sure.
I'm going to start doing some Facebook Lives, because people tend to really quite like engaging in that and asking questions. I have millions of questions that go off in my head, and that they kind of just, they stop being productive, because I could go on talking. That's with you. That's the thing, and I'm sure other people's input would be really good. So thank you so much, and it sounds like you're going to be super busy, and it's nice to hear that the lockdown isn't stopping you being you and moving forward successfully. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Pleasure. Thank you.